Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. And as you can see, it is time for another Gills in the Blood Chats 2. I'm very pleased to announce that this morning I am joined, fresh off of his holidays, none other than former club captain who spent 4 years in Kent, playing around 130 times, scored 5 or 6 goals, Stuart, because there was debate over one that Verdane Oliver tried to
Back
nick him
that
off.
one, yeah, I'll have that for Dane. He had enough, didn't
So for the purposes of this interview, it's
he? Yeah,
130 games there or thereabouts and 6 goals. It is none
yeah.
other than former captain Stuart O'Keefe. Stu, first of all, appreciate you coming on and joining me on this Sunday morning. Really looking forward to getting stuck into this one.
Appreciate it, mate. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on.
Let's get straight into it then. Obviously, going to talk about your time in Kent. It is a Gills related YouTube channel, but want to have a
Yeah,
look back at Stuart's career as a whole. So, Stu, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Ipswich and Southend is probably where you spent your early years in terms of trying to make your way in the big wide world of becoming a professional footballer. Um,
yeah.
we've just had a little chat before we pressed the record button, and the sentence you used is "at my age now," but you're still only 32, I think it is. So it's not
Yeah.
like you're on your last legs just yet.
No, not at
Just
all.
how much has the game changed now in terms of the word apprentice doesn't get used anymore. That seems to have gone out of the game. The old school type of thing, like cleaning terraces, polishing boots,
Yeah.
and that type of thing. Um, do you think there's been changes for the positive, looking at kids now that are coming through, and or changes for the negative?
Probably a bit of both, if I'm honest.
Hmm.
I mean, like I say, when I was coming through, I'd done my apprenticeship, as I call it,
Yeah,
become a YC. Like I say, them words aren't really used and thrown out as much anymore, but you sort of was just to get used to like a first team environment. That was almost what it was for. You do your apprenticeship and you sort of shadow the first team. Um, when I went to Southend, they weren't bad. They were in the championship at the time.
hmm
And Freddie Eastwood just scored against Man United. They beat Man United in the cup. That was actually the day I signed as a kid.
that's
And,
Freddie Eastwood.
yeah, and we obviously went into the building. I'm from Suffolk, like Ipswich way, hence why I was there as a kid.
Yeah,
So it sort of just made me grow up a little bit. That was the whole point of it. It just went to Southend. I moved to Southend, which was quite a big deal for me at the time as a 16-year-old coming out of school. And then went into a reasonably good first team environment, training on the pitch next to them every day. And it was just getting used to how they do things, how they get used to day-to-day basis and winning and that first team environment. That was what it was for. And like I say, because there wasn't massive numbers back then, we didn't have loads. It was you were always so close. So I don't know if you remember, but Gills obviously had it. They would have had a reserve team,
hmm
which was a very good standard of football. It was always if you didn't play on the Saturday for the first team, and the best youth team boys would always play a reserve team in a very competitive league on the Tuesday or Wednesday. And that was what kind of bridged the gap. That was what I thought was excellent for me. It was playing youth team on a Saturday, and then because you was one of the better players, you'd then have to be drafted into the reserves, which was a competitive fixture. Whether you was playing Norwich, Ipswich, whatever, they would have serious first team players out that weren't obviously playing on the Saturday. So that was what I think might be missing now. I think there's that gap. It was almost too far apart from each other. You need to don't want to lose sight of that first team influence on the younger boys. I think it's very important because it's obviously ruthless, and when you get put into that first team environment, it can be very very hard for people.
Yeah, and I think, and it's fair to say that was one of the first things that Neil sort of spoke about when he took over at Gills, was bridging the gap between the youth setups and the first team. And obviously it takes time, and we understand that. But I suppose the other benefit, Stu, is that if you're playing these games that are certainly more competitive than 23s football, if you then do get the call up all of a sudden to go hang about, so and so's injured or someone's got a yellow card or red card. I'm not using that analogy on purpose just because I'm chatting to you, I promise. Um, but I suppose you're more prepared, aren't you? It's not such a big shock and a big step to take when the gaffer pulls you to one side and suddenly goes, "Oh, you're in the squad for Saturday. It's a proper game." You've had that experience of at least semi-competitive football and playing for 3 points of a degree. Whereas now it all seems just about getting minutes into legs and fitness and working out what players are good at certain things rather than being in a competitive nature.
Yeah, I think there's obviously something to be said for that. Boys do need minutes and they do need to hit targets and this and that. But overall, I mean, it's different. As a young player, you want to build your confidence, you want to showcase yourself, you want to prove you can handle men's football physically, mentally, psychologically, all of that side of things. I think like I say, with Neil wanting to get the B team in, it's obviously a really good idea from what I think and my experience. You know, to play competitive fixtures against decent opposition who will have good players out. You know, you don't want to get stuck where you're just playing 21s, 23s football where you might be lacking physically, you might be lacking also tactically, because we've seen the way other teams want to play coming from high levels. 21s, 23s football is not obviously relevant to Gillingham next season, how their first team are going to be playing and what they're going to be coming up against. So it'd be quite clever actually to come against opposition and physically develop men that play a sort of League Two, League One way, you know, because that's ultimately what's going to be asked of them should they get the call Saturday, and it makes them build their confidence as well and get used to it. So it all helps. It all helps towards their progression.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I mean this in the most respectful way, I think League Two's quite a niche league in terms of being able to get out of it. Don't get me wrong, there's good sides in there, and there's teams that go about their business in certain ways and they do it very well. But I think physicality is a massive part of getting out of League Two, whereas not so much in League One now, certainly not the Championship, because we've heard the sayings about Championships now effectively Premier League too. So there's a lot of very good technical players in there. And obviously that started filtering down. You know that, playing at Gills for all that time when we was in League One and we was having to play the likes of Sunderland, Portsmouth, like Rotherham, big sides that are yo-yoing between the third and the second tier. I think there's more of an emphasis, and you can tell me more, on League Two about being a bit more robust and a bit more resilient and just finding a way, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. It's it can be a bit helter skelter at times. You know, the games can be turnovers all the time, quick tempo, not much structure to it. It may look like that. It may look a bit messy, a bit scruffy. And there is a little bit of that. Like I say, when you're at the bottom of League Two, like we was for quite a bit last season before Christmas, like it's almost like the trapdoors beneath you, you know, and that is obviously in the back of teams' minds. So it can be a bit panicky and a bit, I don't know, it's just a bit scruffy and a bit messy at times. So it's just about being a bit tactical as well, and just being a bit cute and a bit understanding of where you're at and what you need, rather than complicating things a little bit too much. Like I say, the higher you go, it becomes a bit more tactical and a bit more clever, if you like, and a bit more calmer. But you know, at League Two at times, you're going to be playing against teams that are fighting for their survival, and it can be really tough at times.
Yeah, and it's interesting you make that point, because I think there's certainly the scary nature, I suppose, is the most simple way of putting it, of the trapdoor into National League is certainly has the potential to be more terminal for clubs than dropping from the Championship to League One or League One to League Two. And for a period of time, obviously us as a fan base were certainly very concerned about that. Luckily it turned. But so you had a couple of years at Southend. And then got the call to go and join Crystal Palace, I think, which was the summer of 2010.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, I mean, Southend was excellent for me. I mean, I've been at Ipswich as a kid and done all the schoolboy stuff, 9 to 16. Then you get told you're not getting a scholarship, and you're doing your GCSEs. You're sort of working out who you are as a kid. You're growing up. You don't really know what direction you've always been this footballer, and obviously you understand how hard it is to be a footballer. It's not easy. So you doubt yourself. You have questions. Where do I want to go in life? But Southend came along, and do you know what? It was probably the best thing I've ever done. It made me grow up. It made me realise that there is other doors, there is other options. It made me see life differently, and it really threw me into that first team environment, which I thrived off. Everyone at Southend was fantastic for me as a kid coming through. Now I think I made my debut at 17 at Leeds away. Like I say, one of the bigger League One teams it was at the time, and I remember Fabian Delph played, and they had a serious outfit. So for me to play in them environments at 17, I wouldn't have possibly got if I was at Ipswich and I'd got an apprenticeship, and I probably would have just been stuck in the youth team for a little bit longer. So for me, I had to take a step back to go forward, which was the best decision I made in my career, I think. I sort of got propelled into the first team thanks to sort of Dean Austin, who was a big influence on that, and Dougie Freeman went there as a player, and he was a big fan of mine. So between them two, they sort of, on my case, have always been the one going up, always be the one going forward, and played, I guess, a handful of games for the first team. And it wasn't until I think Southend got relegated, I think, and they had a bit of financial trouble, which is not surprising because it's still going on now.
Sad to see still, unfortunately.
It is, yeah. Like, obviously, it's a local club to me, and I think the world of them. So all I want to do is just get sorted, because it is a big club at lower league football. You know, they get 8,500 in the conference, which is fantastic. And you know, I just wanted to get myself sorted, but that's another topic. But yeah, I think Southampton got relegated. Still, Steve Tilson got the sack, and I think Paul Sturrock come in. But there was like a technicality where I hadn't been paid as a youngster, and we hadn't been paid as kids and first team. So it's something to do with, like, if you hand in a transfer request, you have X amount of days to pay you, otherwise you can release leave on a free.
Oh, okay.
And I knew that Dougie and Dino had gone to Palace, and they were basically saying, look, we'll have you in a heartbeat, blah, 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 if you want to hand in your transfer request. So for me, I knew I had that, but as a kid, like, it's a hard thing to do on Paul Sturrock's first day. Oh, by the way, there's a transfer request, blah, blah, blah. But I think there was me, Simon Francis, Alan McCormack, maybe Steve Milden or the keeper. I'm not sure. There was about 4 of us who were in the same boat. I mean, Adam Barrett was no one. Adam Barrett comes to Crystal Palace with me. Okay. Simon Francis and Alan McCormack went Charlton, and I think Frank Musa maybe went Leicester, and Steve Milden went Millwall. I think that was how it worked. We all knew we could go to places, so we all basically handed in transfer requests on Paul Sturrock's first day, and he just called us and said, "Look, I appreciate what you're doing. I've got no issue with it at all. You haven't been paid. You've got obviously other clubs to go to." So he said, "I completely understand that." But he said, "I'm just trying to build a team here to get out of League Two." Sure. So sort of put us, said, "You boys train to sit together, and then I'll crack on my team, but I'm not going to cause you any issues." And he was brilliant, to be honest. That's how he left it. And then obviously when the deal got done or whatever, he shook his hands at all the best. So there was no issues that side of things.
So then you had Freeman and Austin had gone to Selhurst Park. I think George Burley was the manager.
That's it.
If Wikipedia's not done me a dirty, then you played a trial game and impressed George Burley sufficiently in the trial game. Is that correct? Which earned you a contract?
That wasn't a trial game. I'd signed a year contract at Palace, but
Sorry, I've read that wrong. No, it was you impressed Georgie on the recommendation of Dougie Freeman. That was it.
Yeah, so they had obviously gone into George Burley and said, whatever, take this kid on a free. He's young, hungry, whatever. Yeah. I think Palace had just come out of administration, actually. I think Steve Parish and the consortium, it was their first summer. So I've been one of their first signings. I think they just stayed up by beating Sheffield Wednesday in the last day of the season. I don't even remember that game in the Championship.
So that was the end of 9-10, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then going into this summer, their club was almost on the floor, if you like, come out of administration, had a squad of like 12 players, obviously going into a Championship season. So that was difficult. But yeah, I went into that environment and obviously I thrived off it. I played one of the reserve games, if you like, against West Ham and played really well. It was my first game for Palace and I absolutely had a blinder. And I think I was on the bench on the Saturday against Ipswich. And, to come from been at Southend or whatever, springboarded into that environment, for me, it was just unbelievable. It is exceptional.
So your first appearance in the 18 or the 16, no, it would have been the 18 still. I can't remember when they kept changing the rules about. So your first team involvement was actually against Ipswich, ironically then.
Ironically, yeah, it was against Ipswich, on the Saturday. Yeah, it's funny how football turns things around.
It is, yeah. So it must, like you've already said it anyway, and I can tell the way you're talking, Stuart, about how exciting it must have been. Because like you say, you've gone from playing, I don't know, no more than around 10, 12 games for Southend to suddenly be jumping up 2 divisions. Must have been really exciting, a little bit daunting, probably a bit nerve-wracking. I want to talk to you about some of your time at Selhurst Park. Old Trafford in the League Cup must have been an exceptional experience. You played 73 minutes also in the 2012-13 playoff final. Yeah. And I think your first Palace goal was actually the opening day of the following season in the Premier League against Sunderland. Yeah. That was quite a whirlwind in terms of sort of 24 months or so from going from League Two football, not knowing whether you were still going to make it as a pro, to 2 or 3 years later, you're scoring in front of, 25,000 at Selhurst Park. That must have been incredible.
Yeah, it all happened so quickly. Like you say, at the age of 19 or whatever, going from the environment at Southend into Crystal Palace, and then we had a real good group of players at Palace, and I don't think we were favourites to go up, but we had Wilfred Zaha, Yannick Bolasie, and Glenn Murray. So it was kind of quite easy in a way. We just used to sort of be hard to beat, resilient, don't concede. And then when we got the ball, we would just give it to Wilf, give it to Yannick, and then they would run 80 yards up the pitch and then either score or get a penalty. And that was literally what happened every week. And Glenn Murray got obviously his 30-odd goals that season in the Championship. And then all of a sudden, we found ourselves in the Premier League. And it was kind of strange because you didn't really think about it. It just happened. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself in the Premier League and the fixture list comes out and it's Arsenal, Man City. And it just all happened so quickly. And for me to just be part of that, sort of be right in the midst of that, was just such an experience. It's not till obviously that's 10 years ago now. You look back and realise like what an achievement it was.
Yeah, I suppose, and like you say, at the time, you've already alluded to it, you didn't sort of take in perhaps the enormity of what was actually going on. And I suppose still being relatively young and starting your football journey, so to speak, probably helped as well, because you didn't have the chance to feel as nervous about what exactly you were achieving at the time. Whereas maybe if you'd done it 3 or 4 years later, you'd have been one of the senior guys and thinking, hang about, this is big. And then you might start overthinking things and that type of thing. But it made me laugh. You said, oh, just give the ball to Yannick or Will Saha. You could
Yeah,
probably fast forward to a couple of seasons ago and say that was Gills. Be hard to
yeah,
beat, give it to Macca or Jordan Graham and just let him whip it in for Dane Oliver.
yeah. It's not surprising that that has success at whatever level. Just don't concede, be strong, give it to your wide boys, get up the pitch, and then have someone in the middle who can finish it. It's quite simple, isn't it?
Yeah, I think was it Brian Clough said, wasn't it, that football's a simple game and it gets overcomplicated by idiots at times. I'm
Yeah,
not sure that's
definitely.
don't
Yeah.
take that as word for word, people that are watching, but it's close enough. So after achieving all that, was you at the point where you were starting to think, I belong at this level now? Because obviously when you're young, you're a teenager, you have doubts like you've already mentioned.
Yeah.
Am I good enough? Should I go and try and find something else to do just in case it does go horribly wrong after, being released by Ipswich and that type of thing? But at what time did you start thinking, Stuart, I belong now? I'm a fully fledged professional footballer? Because you said it all happened so quick. So was there ever a point where you sort of had a certain period of time to sort of sit back and go, I've arrived?
Um, Not really, not really. Like I say, because you're still young, you always, in the back of my head, I always had the feeling like, oh, is this going to last, sort of thing? You always
Right,
think,
okay.
is this just short lived, or am I now the professional footballer? And I think that's what's kept my drive really and my attitude. Um, Obviously, getting told by Ipswich that you're not big enough or physically good enough to be a professional footballer. I think that always stuck in my head. So I always wanted to be the fittest, and I always wanted to be aggressive and tenacious. And I thought I don't ever want to lose that. And yeah, it was also always in the back of my mind. No matter what level I've been at, I've always thought just keep working hard, keep training as hard as you can. My ability is my ability. Like you can only work on that to a certain amount, but
Mm.
my attitude I can choose as much as I can. But yeah, I guess obviously playing in the Premier League and going to these grounds and been involved in probably when Pulis come in most of that Premier League season. Yeah, you probably think, do you know what? I'll have a reasonable career. I'll do all right as long as my attitude stays right and I don't lose that in my fitness and everything stays on top. I should have a good career in.
You just mentioned a name, obviously, there, so I'm going to have to ask, of course, and that's Tony Pulis, who's a big name
Yeah.
around Gillingham for what he achieved in the 4 years he's at the club. How long did you play under Tony, and how did you find him as a manager? Because obviously he was brilliant for us. I know we're going back,
Yeah.
30 years now, so the game would have developed by the time you'd come across him and played under him. But still the same sort of characteristics, I assume,
Yeah,
as what he's had
I
all
loved
throughout his career.
it. Absolutely loved it. So I think obviously Holloway, we went up with Holloway. We were struggling, only one win, I think, and then I think, but maybe Holloway went around October, I want to say, and that season, and then obviously Keith Millen actually was obviously Holloway's assistant, isn't now Gills,
He's
and
at Gills, yep.
yeah, Keith took over for that interim sort of time, a couple of games, and then Pulis come in. And for me, as a 21, 22-year-old, I just thrived off it. His first meetings was, as you can imagine, I know what it takes to stay in this league. If you buy into it or you don't. And my eyes lit up. And I like the fact that he repaid my attitude, if that makes sense.
I was going to say, with the most respect in the world, you're very much a Tony Pulis type player, I would say.
Yeah, and I think he liked that.
Yeah,
He saw me as a kid who was willing to do anything
yeah.
for him, really. The hard thing about the Premier League and some managers is they get sucked into all the the chairman, the board of directors, you start to hear like boys are on serious money now. Like, you link to people on 50, 60, 70 grand a week, and you can sort of lose identity of what Crystal Palace was and what got us there. And then you get obviously more egos, more people saying, well, he needs to be involved because of his money. But what I say to them, he didn't care about any of that. He just wanted people that would work their socks off. And he knew that worked. He knew that if he had a good shape, a good structure, someone at the top who can finish, and boys behind him that would give him everything, that would be enough. We've obviously added a little couple of bits of quality here and there, but he knew that he had enough in the dressing room to stay up. And it wouldn't matter if I was a 22-year-old on relatively no money compared to someone who just signed into summer on big money. He would play me. He would come up to me and be like, "Oh, you're going to be needed tomorrow. We've got Everton away. You're going to be coming on." Things like that. And I just obviously rode the wave and just loved it. Just loved playing for him in that season.
Yeah, there's lots of, just from that short paragraph of what you said there, of characteristics of what we always saw with him at Gillingham in terms of, structure and shape and that type of thing, and being hard to beat first and foremost. And again, like you said, you had people that were willing to run through brick walls and that type of thing, and then you allowed your Wilf Zaha's or that type of player to then go and create chances and score goals to win your football matches. I think it was the start of 2014-15. You started the first 2 games in the Premier League.
Yeah, this is part of my career that I'm not. Yeah, it's a bit of a sour taste. This bit, because it could have possibly gone another direction, but it is what
that is literally my question, and I can tell the way the tone of your voice has changed. You picked up an injury and you lost 2 months or so. I think you were stuck on the sidelines. Which obviously meant you missed out on being named because the ruling had come in about 25-man Premier League, so you didn't get named in it while you was recovering.
Yeah.
You just said it could have gone up or another direction. Did it feel like, or does it feel like now, I suppose, with the benefit of hindsight, like an opportunity massively slipped by because of the injury?
Yeah, possibly. I think so. I mean, you never know. I'm fortunate to have a career I'm still having. But at the same time, I mean, it was weird because that pre-season, obviously, Pulis was there, and we went to Austria for 7 days, went to America for 10 days, and Germany all in one thing. So we had a real intense pre-season, and I was an integral part of that. And I think Bournemouth were interested in me as well at the time. I think Bournemouth were just promoted to the Championship, I want to say.
Okay.
But obviously, Pulis is from down that way. He lives Sandbanks. So he knows Eddie Howe, and he was talking about how good a club it is. It might be a good opportunity for you, but obviously he's still involved here. So there was quite a bit going on for me that summer. So I've done all my pre-season, done everything. And then I don't remember, Pulis resigned. So we had Arsenal first game of the season on Super Sunday, and I think Pulis resigned on Thursday or the Friday before the first game of the season, which left Keith in charge.
Right.
For the initial time. So Keith took the Arsenal game I played. I think we maybe lost 2-1. I think Aaron Ramsey scored a last-minute winner. And then we had West Ham on a Saturday, which I started. We got beat, but I got injured in the first half, bad.
Memory spot on. Absolutely spot on. Yeah, Jason Punchin got sent off at Arsenal in the 89th minute, and Ramsey scored in the last minute to nick it after Breda Hangeland had scored.
Yeah, Breda Hangeland.
Put you in front.
That's it. And I think Koscielny equalised, and then Ramsey
That's
got a last.
it. Yeah, God, look at this stat. I really like.
I'm an Arsenal fan as well.
So. Oh, there you go. Weren't as impressive as we thought. Yeah, and then you started at home to West Ham.
Yeah.
And then what was the score? Who was the goal scorers?
3-1 loss.
Correct.
I'm going to say Shamak scored for us. I know that.
I was going to say, you should know that because it's an Arsenal link again, correct?
Yeah.
He looked like he painted his hair on all the time.
Stuart Downing.
He got the second.
Zarate.
He got the equaliser. Who got the third?
The third, was it?
Yeah, so it was Zarate 1-0. Sorry, Zarate 1-0. Downing 2-0. Shamak pulled one back, and then Striker got the winner. Striker got the third in the 62nd minute.
Was it Carlton Cup? Well, yeah.
Very good. Very impressive. Welcome to Gills in the Blood quiz show.
Yeah.
No, fair play. Carry on. Sorry, we've got off on a massive tangent.
I got a bad tackle by Zarate actually in the first half, and I knew it was a bad one, but I didn't feel anything after that. Like it just, my ankle just went, and I don't know. I should have come off absolutely, but I was 22 playing in the Premier League, and I wasn't coming off
No.
like unless I was getting stretchered. But because I couldn't feel anything, I thought I'm all right here. So I sort of got through 85 minutes or whatever, and
83. Close enough again.
yeah, I got through like 83 minutes, and I took my boot off, and my foot just absolutely blew up. And the next day it was black with bruising, and I knew this was a bad one here. Obviously, I've had a scan on a Monday or whatever, and they've just said you've ruptured everything in that ankle. The reason why I didn't feel anything is because there's nothing there to feel. It's all gone. So I was gutted, understandably, and I mean, if I'd have come off, would it have made a difference? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But we were in the process of obviously finding a new manager, and I think Warnock coming for the next game. But obviously, he'd seen my scan results, and obviously, we'd spoken to the specialists, and I was going to be out on paper 3.5 months, which obviously Warnock's coming in trying to build a team to stay up. He's got renounced to 25 a week later. I'm an easy one to just say you're not going to be involved.
Course,
No,
yeah.
I get that. Like as much as it hurt me, and obviously I was gutted, considering I've been in part of the first two games. He just said, "Look, you're going to be out till December anyway, so there's not much point of you being involved." So that was hard for me to take. So I had to just suck it up, and that was probably the first point in my career that was mentally tough. I'd say the hardest part so far on that journey. Yeah.
Yeah, and you was right. You said you was due out till December. You actually came back for Blackpool in the Championship on the 29th of November 2014, and you played one, two, three, four games for them and didn't play another game for Palace until an FA Cup tie, 4th of January 2015, away at Dover, ironically, which is again is very close to Gills.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must be tough, like you say, because you did feel that you was getting there. And I didn't answer when I asked you that question, Stu, about feeling you'd made it. I didn't mean that in like an arrogant way in terms of I'm here now. I'm one of the. I just meant in terms of like you was getting somewhere. I appreciate that your attitude was always going to be almost think of the worst to keep pushing yourself forward and being the best you can. But you then ended up leaving Palace.
Yeah.
And you went to Cardiff.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that there was a lot of loan spells during your time in Wales. I think you went to MK Dons, you was at Pompey, Plymouth. So it was three spells in them 4 years.
Yeah.
How did you deal with? Because you grew up at Southend. That's where you grew up as a player. You then earned your move to Crystal Palace, where you started to become a professional footballer in the truest sense of the word. You got to the Premier League very quickly and then had it all snatched away. So it was very quickly a roller coaster. How did
Yeah.
you then deal, though, with having to keep moving around and becoming almost nomadic for a period of time and not settling anywhere? Because you've mentioned, I think before we came on here, about this next contract after
Yeah.
Gillingham will be important, more to do with locality, family
Yeah.
time, over anything else. So how did you deal at the time with having to keep being shipped off here, there, and everywhere? Because there's a fair distance between Cardiff, MK Dons, Plymouth, and Portsmouth. You must be doing a lot of travelling.
Yeah, Blackpool in there as well. Yeah, so difficult. But the advice I got given was like, I don't know, you was a young lad just trying to make sort of still establish yourself as a career. So because it, like I said before we spoke on air, like at that level, in the championship level, it's kind of worth it if that makes sense. Obviously financially, and you're going to link with obviously big clubs like Cardiff. Where Cardiff come out of the Premier League, I think the season before, and they were obviously one of the bigger hitters in the Championship, and they put in a bid in the January, as did Millwall, ironically, with Holloway, and I wanted to obviously stay in London because they train in Beckenham next to each other, and I wouldn't have had to move all of that. But Cardiff, I couldn't turn it down if that makes sense because of the money and what they wanted to do and things like that. And I kind of just had to pack a suitcase and make my way over to Cardiff. And I found it tough at the beginning, but when I got in there, Cardiff's a fantastic club. You know, so many good people at that club, and the boys they had there, they had obviously late Peter Whittingham, David Marshall, Matt Connolly. They had real proper pros, if you like, and they made the environment fantastic. So I kind of got over it. And once I got over the Cardiff one, it didn't really become as much of an issue when I needed to go to like a Plymouth or a
Okay.
Portsmouth on loan. You know, sort of Cardiff made me realise that you can be fine, even though you're 3.5 hours away. Like you can still sort of make a home and make a great environment to work in.
I was just interested because I had Mark Byrne on a couple of weeks ago, and he said that it was the best thing he did. At the time, it was daunting, like you've alluded to as well. But he said his advice now to any kid who's got the chance to go out on loan is go and do it. It's the best thing you can do. You're playing for 3 points. It's proper football. It's not under 23s. There's a real competitive environment, like you're saying. So I was just interested to get what your viewpoint on it was, because you were still, you know, you was only sort of, what, 23, 24 still at the time. So it's not
it
like
also brings more out of you as a person. So, which is, I think, is a big thing in football now. People don't. I know Neil speaks about it a lot of the time, personality, and I think it is a big part of being a player. You know, it makes you go to find out new places to live, makes you speak to new people, new ways of doing things, and all that side of things off the pitch improves you as a person, which ultimately improves you as a player and as a team member.
So how close was you to Neil? Was there an overlap with Neil being in charge at Cardiff, or was it
no, just
not
missed?
quite, just missed?
Yeah, that's it. I finished my contract at Cardiff when they come out of the Premier League under Warnock. Warnock left. Neil went in the next thing, but I just signed for Gills. So
that's what I was trying to work it out. So it was about 3 or 4 months after Neil took the Cardiff job, and you'd already come down and signed for Steve.
Yeah.
That gets us nicely onto it then.
Yeah.
The summer of 2019, it was announced, I think, early May that Steve Evans was taking over at Gillingham, and my initial reaction was no, I'm not going to lie. And I'd say that to Steve's face if I ever had the chance. We all know about the histrionics, I suppose, is the nicest way to put it. And there's other stuff that has gone on. And I ended up on the radio being asked, was I impressed with the appointment? And I said, no, I thought there was younger managers that were available at the time that potentially had more sort of longevity and that type of thing. Steve's proved me wrong in, you know, the last few years, aside from a horrible 12-month period, which we'll probably have to talk about. Congratulations, Steve, and Stevenage and all that type of thing. I suppose the move was fairly easy for you at the time because of... So by the time you came to Gills, you'd have been 20, 28?
I think I was 28, yeah.
So I'm assuming we're starting to get into the phase of the career where we're thinking about geography a little bit more now. You've settled down. You've got a partner. Have you got kids?
Yeah. So, I haven't got just a partner, yeah. But all these things come into play. So obviously having a bit of a rocky sort of, whatever you want to call it, 12 months at Cardiff, maybe 18 months, under Warnock, where he basically made it clear I wasn't going to be involved. You then, like I say, going to Plymouth online, you did a year at Portsmouth, bit here at MK, still obviously having to report to Cardiff in the gaps in between. It's not like Cardiff is still my parent club, so I've still obviously got a job to do there to an extent.
It must be like being at school and having to have 2 teachers, I suppose. It can't be that fun.
No, it's not. You know, you're playing for Portsmouth, and then it's like, well, that's finished, but I need to go back to Cardiff now. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't do anything with it. So fair play. I mean, I went on holiday with my partner, and we landed. And as I landed, I'd say mid-May, it must have been maybe mid-late May. Steve Evans just texted me randomly and said, "Obviously, I've got the Gills job. Are you interested?" That was literally it. Something simple. And I thought, do you know what? Why not? So obviously I've done my research, looked into it, spoke to a couple of people, spoke to my agent who knew Steve well, and just went for a chat. We just went for a chat up towards his pub in Peterborough. He came across really well, and do you know what? I thought I've had a stop-start 18 months. I'm going to go into a place where I can live at home. I can sort of start to play every week, play most weeks, whatever, and just enjoy my football again. I think that's what Gillingham, and fair play to Steve, give me that opportunity to do. You know, I hadn't had that period of games. I wanted to be, fans don't like to hear it. We know you want to win games, you want to lose games, you want to deal with sending offs and scoring goals. You want to feel like a footballer. All of that entails, you know. And I think Gillingham definitely give me that opportunity to do that at a good age.
What was because I remember there was a certain individual who was on Twitter because you came into the club and it was announced quite quickly you were going to be club captain.
Right.
So I need to ask about Gabs Aquali because he was still at the club at the time.
Yeah.
And I think then the squad numbers got announced. I think he lost his number 6, which was always the number that Gab wore when he'd been with us. And I think generally through his career anyway. And then I think a couple of years later, I think he put something out on Twitter. I know you don't do social media about the time that he was leaving the club, but was being made club captain one of the pools? Was that mentioned in the initial conversation?
No,
Did not come about until a couple of weeks or a month or so later.
no, nothing was mentioned. I think it was just once he's got me in the building, and other clubs will find this. Like when you get me in the building, you find out more about me on a day-to-day basis, what kind of person I
Sure.
am, and where I drive training, and my beliefs, and this and that. And it probably just thought, do you know what? Reasonable amount of experience at every level.
Yeah. So it's
Why not?
almost it organically developed
Yeah, there
over
was
a
nothing
period of time.
written or said this is you're going to. There's nothing like that. And the same with Neil. It just sort of they know what it requires really, having been in the game so long, and obviously the person most suited maybe goes towards it.
Right. So 1920, 2021, I think it's fair to say that certainly in terms of where Gills had been in probably 3 or 4 years previously, sort of battling relegation in League, we were punching above our weight. I think that's fair to say. We finished. No, first of all, there was that 15-game unbeaten run. That must have been brilliant to be part of. Ironically, I think it was Wimbledon that
we lost the home and away to Wimbledon, didn't we?
bookended that run, didn't they? There was that horrible game away down at whatever it used to be called, the Cherry Red, Kings Meadow, whatever it was, and lost. I think they had one chance and scored because we switched off, and then I think we missed about a million chances. It felt like Ben Pringle lasted about 2 minutes. I think then he got sent off.
Yeah.
And then I think we were stood right behind the away because the away fans were always on the side, weren't they? Right behind the dugout as you come out opposite the tunnel.
That's it. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't like Glyn Hodges at the best of times, but that cemented for me. I thought, what an absolute. Well, we'll carry on anyway. That unbeaten run must have been incredible because we were beating good sides. We mentioned these types of teams earlier, the Sunderlands and that type of thing. We were beating that. They were almost like we almost became their bogey club for a period of time. Bolton, Blackpool, Ipswich, again names that link to your career. How good was that, and how good was that West Ham game?
The West Ham game was fantastic because, from a selfish point of view, it sort of made me go back to my days at Palace, you know, like where you're having a Premier League come down and it's a sellout and the electric boards around the side of the pitch, even little things like that, you know, you take them little things for granted, maybe.
Okay.
And when you go down to League One, League Two football, these games against Premier League opposition don't really come along a lot, which I was quite fortunate this season, actually, because we had 3. Which I thrive off. I enjoy, you know, it's the pinnacle of football playing against Premier League.
Is there almost a bit of you inside that, like you say, because you said it personally from a greedy point of view, so like you're almost going, I'm still good enough to compete against these types of players because I've done it before, especially when you had it almost taken away through no control of your own.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's like I could have still done a job at that level or whatever it is. You know, maybe I couldn't. I might be miles off it. I don't know. But just from my point of view, just to see the West Ham badge at Gills, and like I say, I think David Moyes just got the job, didn't he? So they pretty much went full strength.
He did, yeah, because we was all hoping that Pellegrini was going to get kept on for another week as a fan base, because thinking they were absolutely horrific at the time, and then it got announced that Moyes was taken over, and we was like, oh, he's definitely going to go full strength.
You know what though? I think if Pellegrini would have stayed in charge, I think it would have been very, very close, to be honest. Just with the way
absolutely.
Moyes would have been. But with David Moyes coming in, obviously an exceptional manager at the level, experienced, he's not going to be taking Gillingham lightly. You know, he's going to know exactly what he's in for. We were obviously in a good spell at the time, and no one wanted to play us. That's how when I speak to boys now about them 2 years at Gillingham, everyone hated it. Everyone hated Gillingham. They knew that they were going to be pressed so hard. It was going to be so intense. It was going to be so direct. And I think that's where we beat most teams. It was probably before the game we'd already got one over. I was about to say Sunderland must have hated it because they just couldn't get a goal, or couldn't get a point against
I
us.
think there was that spell that first season that you were there, Stu, weren't there, where they had to come down twice. They came down on a Tuesday night for a cup replay, and I think Brandon Hanlon scored in extra time and sent them
Yeah,
back home with a towel between their legs. And then I think it was Connor Ogilvie scored in the last minute in front of the Raynham in the league game in December. That
yeah,
was unreal that day. That was proper atmosphere.
that was, and we had our Christmas do that night as well. So it was
Oh,
just
nice.
the perfect day. Yeah,
Yeah, there were some really good days. And again, it's interesting, again, linking it back to what other players say, because I've spoke to Carl Dempsey as well,
yeah.
shortly after Burner. And he said the one that stands out was the season after, about in terms of annoying other clubs. And I'm going to say specifically, it was their captain. It was the night we went to Lincoln and won 3-0
Yeah.
because they turned us over by the same scoreline a couple of months earlier, about a
I
month
think
or
they
so
could give
before
us
on
a
the
bit of
telly.
hiding, to be honest. It was on Sky, wasn't it? And
Yeah,
it was a convincing win for them, from what I remember. Was it 3-1 maybe, or was it 3-0? I can't
I
remember.
think it was 3-0. I think it was the same scoreline. And Dempsey said, like,
Okay,
after, I remember the interview, it was Liam Bridcut come out and he basically said, oh, playing that type of football will only get you so far. And Dempsey said, we knew then that we was doing something right because we was starting to piss people off.
rattle cages. Yeah,
Yeah,
people didn't like it. I remember his interview saying, "Oh, we're playing Sunderland next week, so that'll be a better game of football," and things like that. And
that's it,
we
yeah.
started to think, look, we're just doing our business here. However we go about it is up to us. Like, it's down to you to deal with that ultimately. If you can't deal
Literally,
with
it
it,
literally
that's
is
your.
that, yeah. If you can't stop us doing that way, then that's not our
Yeah, we'll
problem at
just
all.
come to your patch and slap you 3-0 and get on the bus. It's not a problem, mate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's the kind of attitude we have with every team. We'll turn up and we'll have a fight and we'll have a go and we'll probably beat you and then we'll move on to next week. Like, that's how we were, and the confidence was building and growing. So it was, yeah, it was a good time.
I want to ask you one question. It's slightly off the cuff because I look at that first season and we were very, very good. We had the unbeaten run. We had the West Ham game.
Yeah.
I think we finished 11th. It was 10th because of points per game because of the hold,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about. That's my
We
next
did
question.
yeah.
Um, and I think we still had like Fleetwood and Rotherham and Coventry to play in the running as well.
Yeah.
So it's still effectively in our hands. And I remember Steve being very bullish, surprise, surprise, um,
Yeah.
about chances of us of getting ourselves into the top six before it all got shut down. Um, but I just felt we was probably, and this is no disrespect to the lads we had up top, I thought we was probably, dare I say it, of the Dane Oliver of the season after type of player,
Sure.
away from really getting ourselves into that. Because we ended up getting Jordan Grant, didn't we, late on in that season as well, on loan, and then he signed in the summer.
Yeah.
I
Jordan
just
didn't really play as much that first season, or
no, I
okay,
think he was a lot
he
off the
wasn't
bench.
as pivotal to what we became. We were very diamond, wasn't we? It
Yeah, we was
was
that first season. It was you, Burner, Ollie Lee.
an outfit at the base.
I think, and then we had Tommy O'Connor. I think played a few
I think
times
because
from the left
Burner
hand side, didn't
got
he? Yeah, when
injured,
Burner got injured.
so Tommy moved down to the left side of that diamond, and I moved across to the right. But that was us.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, possibly I think we knew we were just short. Possibly we were sort of hanging on to that eighth and ninth. It was hard work to think we can break into this. However, the season after, Jordan found his role really because of the Dane Oliver.
we changed it as well, didn't we? 'Cause I think we only went to one up top. We generally played it was either V or John Akindi rather than. I think there was a few occasions we played them both together, but yeah,
Yeah,
generally we changed the system, didn't we?
and it just worked. Obviously, you had Kyle come into the middle with me,
Mm.
and I think we worked together really well. We had a good relationship in the fact that Kyle was one of the players that wanted to go and join in all the time. He wanted to score goals. He wanted to be the, I don't know, like the match winner, and he wanted to move on his career, and he has done, and he's obviously doing really well at Bolton now. He won't be far off the championship in another year or two,
Yeah,
but that was the ratio that worked for us. Carl would go and do his stuff, and my experience and know-how and attitude would hold the middle, and it just seemed to work. We'd obviously break forward, win the ball back, be tenacious, get it to Jordan Graham, he'd put on a sixpence, and B would score from 6 8 yards out. And it just seemed to work. And I think that season we became closer to the playoffs, and we probably should have done it. We should have made the playoffs, I think.
I think Kyle said Oxford was the day that we all knew that it had gone up in smoke. Unfortunately, when we blew away the
Yeah,
2-goal lead.
What was tough about that season is it was COVID. Well, it wasn't COVID; it was behind closed doors.
Yeah,
So I think that may have had a factor to play. I mean, every game was empty, and maybe you might have nicked a couple of points by having a crowd there. Or I suppose every team could say that as well, you know.
that's
But
the thing. Yeah,
Oxford away, 2-0 up. Maybe, do you know what I mean? If the Gills fans are like, you don't know, you might have just been able to hold on to a point or something. It might have just made you dig in a bit more. Where it's always felt a bit reserve football. Do you know what I mean? It almost felt a little bit like that every week. Maybe that had a point to play, but you know, 2-0 up away at Oxford, we shouldn't be losing the game. Because I think they were probably one place below us at the time. So it really give them the
I think
incentive
we
to.
went to Blackpool shortly after, didn't we? And got slapped 4-1. I think they had the lad up front, Jerry Yates. I
Yeah,
think gave us a bit of a run
yeah,
around, and yeah,
yeah.
it looked to me like we just because Steve was very big on a core group of players. And I know you mentioned your relationship with Carl, but I think for a lot of that, there was a good period of that first season that Carl arrived that you didn't play together, did you? Because I think he got injured opening day, and
Yeah,
then
and I
he
broke my
came
leg.
back, and you broke your leg in that game against
Yeah,
Coventry. So it
yeah.
wasn't until I think probably the following January where you started to play.
January the turning point because I don't think we'd been overly great, if I'm honest, until we sort
We
of
were very inconsistent the first half of that COVID
yeah,
season, yeah.
and we couldn't really find a balance. You know, I remember there was a lot of changeover in personnel with centre half partnerships. If I'm not wrong, I think we had Magoma, and then he was in and out, and then Cundy, and then obviously over. We were trying to find
I
something
think
that
I think
worked.
Cundy was probably the most important signing of the entire season because it gave
Yeah,
Jack Tucker a partner, didn't it?
that's it.
He played
Yeah,
with
and they sort of
there was
steadied the ship.
there was Magoma, Medley, Ogilvie,
Yeah.
um, Drysdale. I think played centre half. There was
Oh yeah,
so
I forgot
many, but
that. Drives that.
they was all kids,
Yeah.
and Jack Tucker was still a kid next to him as well. So it was a very inexperienced centre back partnership. But I just think for whatever reason that when Cundy, I said to Carl Dempsey as well, and I don't mean to keep going back to that interview, but I don't know what you feel about it, Stu, but I thought the January transfer window certainly made us more consistent. We got in Cundy,
Ollie Lee.
Ollie Lee came back, and also the lad Slattery from
I think
Southampton.
January window was key at that season because I think Steve Evans obviously knows. He knows we haven't been good enough. He knows we've been inconsistent. He knows we maybe had too many younger boys trying to find their way in the game.
Mhm.
So he went back to sort of what do we know in that January? Obviously, he knows he's got me coming back fit, which is a
Mhm.
plus. He's got Cundy, who's obviously settling in to steady that partnership with Tucker and sort of manage Tucker in a way because
Mhm.
Tucker's still finding his way.
Yep.
Um, and then Ollie Lee, who obviously had a very good season for us. Slattery had great pedigree coming through Southampton. They were good signings, and I think that was what gave us the consistency and base to build more results from. And I think, like I say, it's no surprise that since them boys came back together, we sort of kicked on.
Yeah, I think first game they all played was Accrington away, and we won 1-0, didn't we? And we were very
Yeah,
much like a Gillingham and a Steve
yeah, more
Evans
like a
team.
Gills side, if you like.
Like you
Yeah,
said, very hard to beat, get up the pitch, and then let the good players go and create chances. How do you look back on them 2 years?
good.
As
Like,
much as there's a probably a sense of a little bit of frustration that we got close twice and didn't quite get it over the line, but you must be
yeah,
immensely proud of what that group had achieved. Because, like I say, when you came into the club, we was a team that was battling the drop in the third tier.
yeah, it's a tough one because people say, "Oh, should have enjoyed it more." Should, but at the same time, you live in the moment, which is
Yeah.
hard to explain to people. When you live in the moment, it's hard to sit back and look back at what you're doing. You know, you live in it. So
Mm.
um, it was great to be a part of a team that no one wanted to play. You know, and I don't think Jill should ever lose sight of that. And I think Neil knows that now. Like,
Yeah,
do need to make it a bit of a fortress. Let's make it uncomfortable. That's when we got success them 2 seasons. And when you look back for two top 10 finishes in League One,
yeah,
considering the size of the teams that were in that league at the time, I think it's an exceptional achievement and shouldn't be taken lightly. You know, it was a brilliant couple of years.
absolutely. Yeah, and like I say, it's just I've said it to everyone that I've spoken to regarding the second season is that it's just a shame that we never got to be there. And like you say, you don't know because
Yeah,
it's
I'm
easy to
sure
say, oh,
Sunderland
we
have something to say about that. Yeah, so
yeah, and it's easy to say we might have nicked the odd point here, but we might have had players that froze playing in front of a crowd, so we might have lost points in
yeah,
other
of course, yeah, you never
situations
know.
as well. But I've got to ask because I have to ask every player that played in that season. how did you? It must be so difficult for footballers who are, you know, structured. They live by routine. You get up on a Monday, you go training. You go Tuesday, you go training, or you play on a Tuesday night. Generally, you get a Wednesday off, then you train Thursday, Friday, play Saturday. How hard was it? Firstly, because I assume, like all of us fans, thought it was never going to last as long as it did. Um, how did you sort of fill the void? Because there was nothing to do. You was essentially doing training in like in your gardens on your own. You was all
Yeah.
isolated. And then how did you deal with having to play a whole season behind closed doors? Aside from, I think there was one game we played a trophy game, and there was about 300 people there. So that it must have been very
It
alien
was
to
strange. Yeah,
new
it was
people.
strange. Obviously, the country didn't really know how to deal with it,
No,
and we were obviously an essential worker. I don't know what bracket we come under at the time. We were an outdoor activity where so we could obviously mix, but it just became so tough logistically on a day-to-day basis. I would say that was the hardest thing because, with all due respect, we haven't got the facilities a Premier League club has. But that is what I found difficult. The government or the people in charge, football club, all right, well, they will have the facilities that Arsenal have got. Like, no, like
no.
we're league football team, but it's not all like that. And I think we had to then juggle and shuffle bodies around and find rooms that weren't even meant to be rooms. Do you know what I mean? To try and go with the obviously the laws at the time because you know the consequences were big and we didn't want people getting ill ultimately.
Of
People have
course,
got
yeah.
families and small children and people with health issues. So that has to be your main focus. But like I said, it was so difficult to achieve on a day-to-day basis. You just had to turn up at the training ground and then go home, and you couldn't ever feel like it was your job. It just felt like you were just turning up, playing, and going home. It didn't feel fully invested in it. You know, it just made life so difficult. And take my hat off to people like Jammer and Gaz who had to deal with that side of things. You know, it must have been so hard for them to put everything together and make sure we apply by the rules and regulations because it was such a difficult time.
Well, yeah, because like we've said, you footballers are used to just being told, right, you train at 10, you eat at 12, you go home mid-afternoon, early evening, and then you come back the
Yeah,
next day and you do it all again. So it must have been a little bit more, yeah, definitely, certainly strange. Like you said, it was for the whole country, the whole world. Even it was a very
yeah,
strange
it was
season.
almost like the match days didn't feel real. That's what I took from that season. You have all your preparation, so like you're in the dressing room on a Saturday, as you would be today, like it was in COVID. You don't know what's going on outside. We do to an extent, but you can't physically see it. So you're preparing as you always would. You know, the same things are getting said. The nerves are there. You're doing all your normal things, and then you walk out, and there's no one there. Like it was a strange feeling, and then when the game's going on, you can hear people talk and you can hear conversations going on, and it's just takes the edge of it. It has to. It has to. Yeah.
Did you get used to it at all, or was it just something you just never really dealt with properly?
Nah,
Like you
not
say, you
really.
just get on with it because it's
You
because you
just
have
get on
to.
with it. Obviously, there's a job, and still 3 points on the line. You know, which
Mm.
made it. It was a weird way to think about it, but there's still 3 points, and there's still obviously places to go. But it just took the edge of it, and you know, it was obviously never as sweet when you win and there's no one there to see it, or like say you go Lincoln away 3-0 and it doesn't really matter, whatever, you know. So
Yeah, we
um,
know a lot of the celebrations were very sort of low key, whereas you get your
yeah,
generic
I
type
think
of
we
knee
got last
slides.
minute equaliser at Sunderland, didn't we, that season? I think
Jordan
Jordan
Graham, yeah, I think so too. All yeah,
you know, and you think we missed out on things like that, and the fans did as well. You know, it was tough for them. You know, the fans were obviously struggling at home, struggling that, and you know, football's their out, isn't it? Football's the time when they can go and get away from life, if you like, and go and enjoy a game of football. And you know, that was taken away from so many people. So yeah, it was tough for everyone, really tough.
yeah, that was definitely it. And yeah, I had a mental breakdown. It's weird that you've mentioned that, and I'm not talking about
Yeah,
sympathy or anything like that. And that was at the start of that 2021 season around the
yeah,
October time, because everything that you do in your life, you have like you say, you're out that relieve stress. You can go to the pub, you go around your mate's house, you go
yeah.
out for dinner with friends, you go to the football. You couldn't do any of that, and yeah, it had a massive effect on probably more people than we've ever realised and still don't
I
realise.
completely
Um,
agree.
yeah, so that's up to the end of 2021.
But yeah,
Um, it's obviously become apparent over the last couple of months that you've left Gills. We know that you're not having a contract renewed. You recently spoke to the club, because I know you don't do social media at all, but you did the club's Twitter interview and that YouTube type of thing, and said that the last 2 years, up until probably January,
Yeah,
so we're talking from the start of 21-22 to January 2023 after the takeover, were very tough.
yeah,
Um,
very.
we had various stories that were coming out about relationships between managers and owners and that type of thing throughout the relegation season from League One. There were still issues right up until December the 23rd, when it was announced that Brad and Shannon were taking over the football club. Did that affect you as players, all them stories? Because again, it comes back to what you guys want to do. You just want to come in and train, and then you want to go and prepare for a game or have a sleep in the afternoon if you've got a Tuesday game and that type of thing. Is it tough having to deal with all the extra stories that you're seeing in the maybe not you so much, so maybe it's a slightly different question for you, Stu, because you don't go on Twitter or Instagram or
Yeah.
that type of thing. But you must have been aware of it as
I think
club captain, that there was clearly a strained relationship between Mr. Evans and Mr. Scally very early on in that relegation season. I think the
yeah, I
Chelsea
think what I'll say is, as a player, you initially say, "Oh no, that takes care of itself. We just concentrate on the football," and I get that. But I think subconsciously it has to,
mm-hmm.
whether that's just a change of mood of staff members, or change of, I don't know, just change of atmospheres around the place, has to have an effect on people. We're the
Mm-hmm.
ones that are playing, and if we're feeling people have been off of us or a little bit that, we might start to doubt ourselves subconsciously, and all these little percentages add up. And like I said, Gillingham are not a club where they can chuck millions at it and
No.
that'll be all right. We'll be all right because we can just go and sign a striker for £1 million. Like, we had to get the maximum out of everybody at that football club, all working in the same direction to finish top 10.
Yeah.
And when a club with a budget the size of Gillingham, that doesn't happen, you can soon go wrong.
Yeah.
And I think maybe subconsciously things are starting to creep in. You're hearing rumours on social media. John Akinde was having a fallout with the man, and all of this. And it soon sort of takes its toll and takes conversation in the dressing room. And, maybe we're off it a little bit. Maybe Steve Evans is not put in the same as he did the year before. And boys have been a little bit off. And all these things add up. And like I say, ultimately, we were losing more games than we were winning and putting us in a terrible position.
Snowball effect, isn't it? And it happens both ways, like you say, positively or negatively. And unfortunately, it was very much negatively that season.
Yeah.
I forgot about the John Akinde one, unfortunately. And of course, and he's going to want to come out and say, no, this isn't right. I'm going to defend myself, because there was that issue with
Yeah, of
childcare
course.
thing,
Yeah,
wasn't there? Yeah.
we're all men, we're all proud people. We're
Yeah.
footballers at the end of the day. We're very proud people. When someone doesn't, when someone hurts our pride, it hurts. We don't like it. So
And I suppose that's different, isn't it? People can criticise a performance on a Saturday afternoon or a Tuesday evening, and as long as it's done the right way, again, there's ways and means of doing everything.
yeah.
But I suppose when you see stories come out about John Akinde not turning up because he's got to look after his kids, and then if it's not true, I suppose when you start questioning an individual's integrity, you're
I
going
think
down a very different and difficult path.
yeah, it becomes hard then. Like I say, John's a lovely guy, great guy, and I think when you go down that path, you question someone's, other than something's attitude, like I say, their home life or this and that, things can become difficult. Boys can start to doubt what's going on and question themselves and question the staff and this and that. And it can all just become a bit messy. And I think that's what happened. It just become messy. We lost what we are. We lost sense of direction. We lost belief ultimately because the results weren't coming. We lost confidence, which is everything. And accumulation of them things, like I say, when we haven't got the ability to just say, "Oh, we'll sign a striker for £1 million to get us out of it," it puts us in the bottom six.
Yeah, because I remember coming up and watching us at Hillsborough, and we drew 1-1. We were really good that day. I think that was like
Yeah, I
November.
enjoyed that game. Yeah, I really enjoyed that game. Yeah,
But we lost Kyle and we lost Verdane in the same game.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so obviously, if you're taking out your main focal point, you're taking
yeah.
out your captain
Yeah,
on the pitch. Obviously, we
yeah,
still got you as club captain.
yeah.
Like you say, we can't then just go and replace them as and when we
Nah,
wish, because we
that's
can't.
a good point. Actually, I didn't actually. I wasn't going to touch on that, but now you've said it. Yeah, we lost Kyle took quite a reasonable mid-length knee injury, and obviously Verdane as well, who were probably our best two players, I'd say, at the time, or two most pivotal players that season, maybe. And I don't know if you remember, but we ended up going to teams playing. I know Harvey's gone on and done all right this season in Northampton, but people like Harvey were coming onto the scene with no experience. And the way we wanted to play, this is why as a senior player, we found it hard because we knew what it took to play that way and how hard and physical and horrible and nasty we had to be on the pitch to gain advantages and get results. And then when you throw kids in there that have never played a game of football, to tell them to be that way, it's not going to happen.
I think there was one game where we literally had children on the bench, didn't we? We had I think we only had about 4 or 5 subs.
I remember playing Crewe away and remember looking around the team, and it was a shell of what it should have been. It was so weak, and I thought we were playing Crewe, who ultimately went down that season as well. So there was a relegation fight there, and I think we got turned over convincingly. And I remember that being the game, thinking, do you know what?
Rotherham was the one for me, Stu.
Was it 5-1, wasn't it?
We took the lead after about a minute. Our bench was Tommy Crump, Harvey Lintott, Bailey Akehurst, and Gerald Sotolo. That was it. That was literally it.
Jesus, yeah. So when you look at that, I mean, how can we? It's hard, and we've still got to go out there, and I think we lost Max after 5 minutes as well. He done his shoulder.
He did his shoulder, didn't he? Did his shoulder that night, so we had to bring on.
Harvey come on.
Yeah, Linton came on, and Jacko got sent off with about 20 minutes to play and all.
yeah. So and they missed the penalty.
Good times.
Yeah. So I think when that was when it really hit home, when you'd look around the match day squad and you'd see kids on the bench that were never ready to play the Gillingham way and what it took to obviously get results at that league and that level. And we were well short, if I'm honest. Up until Neil come in, we were well short.
Yeah, and it's hindsight, isn't it? And it's easy to look back and look at it and pick holes, but I just wanted to get a feel because obviously we don't see everything as fans, but I just wanted to ask how much that affects it because, like I said, there was also early in the season Steve played Max up front, didn't he, for 45 minutes in a League Cup game to just prove the point that we didn't have enough options in forward areas because Verdane had rolled an ankle or something like that. It was just, I think it was very early on in the season that we realised we was going to be struggling. But I think we went to MK Dons New Year's Day or the day after New Year's Day, and we got a few back from injury, I think, and we drew 0-0. And I think Steve come out in the press afterwards and said, we'll be absolutely fine now. We've got people fit. And MK Dons were obviously absolutely flying at the time.
Yeah.
Was there a general feeling that it would turn around, or was that just manager talk in the press to try and get everybody inside? Because a week later, we were absolutely horrific at home to Ipswich and we were 3-0 down inside 10, 15 minutes. And Steve went the day after, didn't he?
Yeah, I think maybe like the MK game, I remember it well. And we played well that day. If, like I say, considering MK Dons were flying, the position we were in, going to put a digging performance like that, and I think we had a couple of chances on the counter. And I thought, you know what, that was more like it. That was one of the only few games that season that felt right. Not many did. That game felt right, and I think maybe Steve's come out after the game and probably he's related a lot more to that performance, and maybe he's got a little bit carried away by saying we'll be fine because he's seen that and thinks if I can produce that more often than not, we'll be all right.
Yeah, of course.
It wasn't. Obviously, a week later, however long it was, we produced the Ipswich performance, which was probably one of the worst performances we had as a collective. I think under that Steve Evans era, it was unexplainable.
It wasn't a Steve Evans team. It wasn't a Gillingham performance. I think we started off with Robbie McKenzie up because I remember walking into the ground and we looked at the team. Robbie McKenzie's playing up front with Verdane Oliver, and I'm like, I know he's versatile, but hang on, what's going on here? That was the general sort of consensus among certainly the people I were talking to. It just because we'd also had the Steve Evans to Stevenage link a month before, and he didn't go.
Yeah.
So there was another thing to throw into the mix. It just looked to me, and I might be completely wrong, that I don't know. He was almost, trying to get sacked. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, all of them things we'll never really know the truth of the matter. What people's agendas are, but as a player and as captain of that team, I think I don't even know how I played it, but we might have done. or maybe he pulled out in the warm-up, I think. Something like that maybe happened with Kyle. I can't remember.
In
But
the Ipswich game.
yeah, did he play?
Just trying to have a look. He was on the bench.
Okay.
You
There,
started with
another
it
thing,
was.
there was rumours of Carl going. There was Bolton linked and Charlton, I think, and
I'm not sure what the system was. We had. It looks like it was a back three. Trying to work it out. Jacko played. Mackenzie. I genuinely don't know what the team was. Oh no, because Mackenzie was up front, wasn't he?
yeah, I think it
That
was
looks
4
like it was.
4-1-1. I think I
But
was
then we had
right.
Jacko played. Tatonda played. But then we had also had Ema, Tucker, and Reece Bennett all started.
Tucker played centre mid.
Oh yes, we went through that spell, didn't we? We Tucker played
Yeah,
holding midfield, so it would have been 4-4 with back four with Jack just in front. Yeah,
that would have been the diamond, if you like. It would have been Tucker and then Robbie McKenzie at the 10, I think, no?
it
Or
might have
with
been.
Rob up top.
Might have been. We also had Verdane and Mustafa Carrier. I'm not sure.
Yeah, see, I think we were like that. And it just showed, to try and this is sort of I want to go on to, but trying to be captain and walk out and be a proud person, and you're putting on that performance like it's so hard. It really is because we were nothing. That's all I'd explain. We were just nothing that game. I remember just running around because that's what I can do if all else fails, just run around. But I remember running thinking I can't even get close to anyone here. This is just absolutely disastrous. And we were well and truly beaten. And obviously there was a worse one to come a week later.
Yeah, I think, and at the time we was all sitting there thinking this is like you said, this is one of our worst days, certainly in
Yeah,
recent times as a Gillingham fan. And then Oxford came at the end of the month. We know that wasn't under Steve Evans; he'd already long gone.
yeah,
Um, all right, then let's talk about Oxford before we get on to the next question because you brought it up. I
yeah,
tweeted at the time and said, my worst day supporting Gillingham Football Club, and I've been going since the 90s regularly. My first game
yeah.
was 89. I mean, there's been relegations, there's been promotions, there's been all sorts of stuff, but that was probably the most pathetic capitulation I've ever witnessed. Like, to concede 4 penalties in one game was just. I
Unheard
mean, we
of.
can sit back here now and you have to almost laugh about it because it was just one of them days where literally everything went wrong. But it just wasn't Gillingham Football Club. That was
No,
so far away from what we get told the
we
Gillingham
just
football
lost
team is.
ourselves then. I think obviously Loves had come in, great guy, was really good with me. But I think it was past that. Do you know what I mean? It was almost past getting Loves in and being a good guy around the place. It was deeper than that. And we had just lost ourselves. We'd lost all confidence. We'd lost all belief, ability. We didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. And like I say, you can't just turn it on and off, and that's what I'll allude to. You can't just turn up. Yeah, we're not good enough to just turn up and compete against an opposite team down for promotion.
Sure.
Like you can't. Like, and you concede 4 penalties. What chance have you got? Really, you haven't got a chance. And we were just well and truly beat. And I think it was then that was the game when I thought we are banging trouble here. I think that and the Ipswich game, I thought we're going down if we don't change something dramatically as soon as possible.
It was probably about the third or fourth time I was convinced we were getting relegated. And yeah, I think even when Neil took the job, we all knew it was going to take a miracle, and we got close to a miracle eventually, and we'll speak
Yeah,
about that shortly. But yeah, there would just seem to be so many things throughout that season, Stuart, that kept conspiring against us, and it catches up with you eventually, doesn't it? I suppose is the best way
yeah.
to,
There's no
to
way
put
of
it.
putting it. Catches up. You're playing against good footballers, against good teams, good outfits. They're organised. They know what they're doing. You can't turn up with 4 subs that have never kicked a ball. You can't do it.
No,
You're gonna get what you deserve, and that's ultimately what we did. All right, we probably could have and should have stayed up. Maybe would have been tough, but ultimately we got what we deserved that season, which was relegation. Because for the most of it, we were a shambles.
and the table doesn't lie, does it? Unfortunately,
No,
it
it
never
doesn't.
does.
No, we
We
don't.
can all,
Yeah,
like you say, we can all look at this game or that game and maybe miss this chance or should have
yeah,
had that penalty, but at the end of the day, we got less points and the other team stayed up above us.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
what was the gap like? Because I'm going to ask now because you brought it up. Sorry, I know this isn't in the questions that I sent you, but how did you players deal with the fact that because there was a big gap between Steve Evans being sacked on the 4th of January and then we had this weird announcement a couple of days later came out on the social media feeds to say that Steve Lovell was in charge and Alex McDonald, of all people, was assistant manager because he was out with his knee injury
Something
still.
like that. But yeah.
It just, and then there was another sort of 3 or 4 game period before Neil got announced. What, from my point of view, just as a fan, and I'll ask you, Matt to Stuart rather than fan to professional footballer,
Yeah.
that just looked like a complete shambles as well. Why are we sacking a manager and then it's taken us another month? Bearing in mind
In a window, bear in
a
mind.
transfer window as well. Yeah, that was my next point. Before appointing another full-time manager, it just looked to me like there was, I don't know, it just looked completely odd.
That what you just said there, it sums us up that season. We just didn't have a sense of direction or of a purpose, or we didn't really know what was going on. I think we didn't know what was going on the pitch. We couldn't nick a point off the pitch. We obviously didn't know what was going on. We're getting rid of one manager. We're getting Lovell in, who's obviously a good guy, knows the club, but with what plan is something we didn't know is Lovell here to the end of the season? Is are we going to get someone in? Obviously, you see the rumours and you hear the rumours around the place, and we're linked. I think it was Bandy Woodman for the majority of that time,
Yeah.
Bromley, amongst other names. And as a player, you just don't know what's going on, and all you can do is, as a captain, all I try to do is be like, look, we've had a tough time. Loves has come in. He's a great guy. Let's just try and get back to smiles on faces as best we can. And I think we had the results might not have been there, but I think the performances were better. I think Burton at home was Loves' first game, and I think for about an hour we were right.
Yeah, we took the lead, didn't we? It was really good, and then collapsed and conceded
And then
3 soft goals again. Yeah.
And I think we went to Wigan and we were 2 down after a poor first half, but we had something about us to get back to 2-2, but conceded late. So we were like close, but not there yet. And I think, like I say, the Oxford game was just a nail in the coffin, really, for Loves. That this is bigger than that. This is more than
there was
just.
also the one Shrewsbury was immediately before the Oxford game as well. And you spoke about we go down because we deserve to, and we said about if this had gone in and that Lloydie hit the bar, didn't he, in front of the Rainier with a free kick? If that had gone in, we stay up. It is fine margins. I get that, and yeah, I totally respect what you're saying about the performances. Certainly, it looked like people wanted to play again. Is probably the best way to sum it up from a fan perspective. It looked like a lot of people didn't want to be out there up until the Ipswich game.
Yeah, I'll go with that. It's Love's come in and done the job that I guess he was told to do, is in get people wanting to just be out there again, get them confident in themselves from a Monday to Friday, so that on the Saturday they're in the right or best place possible to go and at least perform to a level. It wasn't enough. No, obviously Neil come in and sorted it out, if you like, as best he can, and done obviously a reasonable job actually.
I'd say reasonable is probably an understatement. To be fair, to get us that close. I think if anyone had said to us as a fan base, and probably you as players, if we go to the Rotherham game on the box last day of the season with a chance of having it in our own hands, I think we'd have all snapped arms off. Yeah, we'd have taken that because it was effectively 11 points, wasn't it, at the time, because the goal difference was horrendous as well. You've played under 2 managers predominantly at Gills. I'm not going to count Steve Lovell because I don't think that's fair on him, first and foremost, to come into a situation like that and then to have you judge him as a gaffer. What are the biggest differences between? Obviously, we all see it as supporters. There's a very different approach clearly between the two. But what was your relationship like with both? Obviously, he was captain under both of them, so there's quite a similarity. But what's the biggest differences as well between Steve Evans and Neil Harris? Because they can't, from what we see of Saturdays and Tuesdays, they can't come from more different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, no, and it's a little bit like that as a player. Maybe not as much, because I think they both want to win games of football. Mm-hmm. They both want to fight. So they've both got that similarities, and they both obviously can be aggressive, obviously different levels. And that's what you will obviously see on the touchline. Neil's very much more in control of his emotions, and also a lot more tactical, a lot more thought behind it. Livermore is obviously a massive input on that side of things. So Neil's very more I don't know what the word is, like I say, more tactical, more astute, really. Steve Evans is very much roll sleeves up, let's have a fight. And like I say, he's good at recruiting, gets boys in, gets boys that buy into it, and makes teams very, very hard to play against and wins a lot of games of football in low league football. So ultimately, who's right, who's wrong? There's no real way about it. But the differences would be like Neil's more training ground based, tactical shape, work on things, more method behind it, whereas Steve was more match day input, as in the week, not really as fussed about as much. However, it's all about Saturday. That's what I was
So would
saying.
Steve leave it more to like Rains and stuff like that, to Paul Rayner to do it, whereas Neil will be out there in amongst it a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have more meetings under Neil and analysis and look at opposition and things like this. And like I said, training in the week, have a theory behind it as to what we're leading into on Saturday. Steve knew what worked in his mind. So he just didn't really care about the opposition as much. It was just, I know what works on the training ground from there to there. And then it's all about Saturday for Steve. It's all about, how do I get the most out of this group of players, out of this crowd?
Mm-hmm.
How do I get the referee on side, which he didn't manage to do a lot. But do you know what I mean? All these things.
Steve Evans getting the referee on side. There's a sentence I didn't think I'd hear.
So that's how they're different. But ultimately, they still want to win games of football. They're still aggressive. Obviously, Neil's a very aggressive striker. I played against him, so he's a winner. He's obviously played a lot of time for Mills. So he's not going to go down without a fight. So that side of things, they're both different, but have touches of similarities.
So yeah, probably more similar than you sort of give credit to when you only see them on a Saturday afternoon or a Tuesday evening from sat in the stands, as opposed to you boys who see them sort of probably near on 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Right, we're nearly at the end of our chat. I want to ask you one final question. If you had to pick one biggest highlight and one biggest disappointment, regret from your time in Kent, what would they be?
I think there's one highlight that stands out. Like there's like a group of games that stands out. Like Sunderland, just Sunderland in general stands out for me. All of the games against Sunderland, I enjoyed. We thrived off. So they stand out, and the FA Cup, the West Ham at home stands out. All right, we lost, but that stands out, and as does the Brentford game this year, which like not many people seem to mention as much, but to play there and win there this year and play at Premier League ground. And not fun. I think we was the only team to win there, weren't we, this year?
I don't think there was many others.
Arsenal, I think. So yeah, I think they're the ones that stand out. The biggest regret was getting relegated at the end of that third season. That's my biggest regret, because it was goal difference. It was so close, and I think that might have led on to a different start of last season had we stayed up. Do you know what I mean? It might have not been as bad as it was between obviously August and January. I think it would have been a little bit different. So that's my biggest regret, not getting a point from somewhere across that season to just stay up.
Yeah, and again, we go back to the point about you are where you are for a reason.
Yeah.
But you can't help but look at games probably like
Sunderland away.
Last minute conceded, didn't we? Because we switched off from a cross that came into our box, having defended them brilliantly for 95 minutes. Fleetwood at home.
Yeah.
Cheltenham away, 2-0 up. 1-0 up, 2-1 up.
Yeah. They're the ones where I think, do you know what? But this is football, isn't it? I'm sure if you spoke to every one fan of the 92 clubs, will always say somewhere, if this, if that. So,
of course, yeah.
We have to understand what it is. But that's my regret.
Yeah, because it could have painted a very different picture for the last sort of 8-9 months. And you never know, I suppose, in terms of both the club and you, from a personal perspective, you might have played more games.
Yeah, maybe
might be staying put. You don't know, do you?
It might have just been an easier environment to be captain of. A team that's just stayed up rather than a team that's going down, and we're trying to find who we are again. All sorts of things. But I think it just might have been different personally. I've been a bit selfish personally. I think it might have been different. Yeah, it might have been a different start to the season because it was obviously so tough.
Okay, I said I'd ask you one question, but I'm going to ask you another one now. You're very driven towards a group of players, whether that's the 11 that are on the pitch with you, those on the training ground, the match day 18.
Yeah.
You come across as being a selfless player, first and
Mhm.
foremost, in terms of making sure that everyone else is okay and this group's doing the right things all the time, whether that's training ground or on a Saturday afternoon or a Tuesday evening. How tough, from a personal pride point of view, then was 22, 23? Because you played the first half of the season, which was
Yeah.
quite frankly an abomination. We can't get away from that, regardless of
Yeah.
whose fault that is or for factors. We couldn't score a goal, let alone win a football match. I
Never
think if it, I
shot.
think if it wasn't for the cut runs, we'd have all gone completely insane.
Yeah.
But more so, and you can tell me whether I'm wrong, Stu, was it more difficult the second half of the season for you? Because despite the
Oh,
club
question.
getting better and winning more
Yeah.
games, you wasn't influencing things as much as you wanted to because you weren't getting in the side.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'd still say it was harder for the first half of the season.
Okay.
Um, Simply because I was the face of that, if you like.
Mhm.
That's how I saw it.
And you was
Um,
player of the year before. So it's a big come down from
yeah,
a personal perspective. All right, we got relegated, but you were still recognised as putting in good performances on the pitch and from an individual basis.
yeah. So there's a little bit to be taken from that personally. The start of the second season, I found so difficult to, I don't know, to perform in the fact that we were so bad, and like the people we had coming in the building just. I don't know, no disrespect, Elkin Baggett, like we tried so hard with to make work and
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't work. And we had Ryan Law coming, he was a young lad making his way in the game. It just wasn't the time
Mm-hmm.
or the place for that. And we were going and losing to teams that we shouldn't have been losing to. And like I say, it was just like I say, that snowball effect that I'll go back to. It was almost as nothing I could do here. But I still had to go and lead them boys out and try and put up a fight or a performance that just wasn't there. And I just felt like I was fighting a losing battle. And I feel like I was the forefront of that by being player of the year before, by being what I've achieved in the game, by my experience. I felt like personally I took it so hard. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'll take that home with me every night of the week. And that was what I really struggled with. The second half of the season, tough for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It became easier in the fact that the environment became better. We've
Mm-hmm.
been taken over. You've got new boys coming in the building that were improving us, and we were winning games of football. And like anyone will tell you, if you go into a building on a Monday after you win on a Saturday, everything's fine. Everyone's fine. The physio department's fine. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's happy. So that side of things became easier because it was just a better place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it became harder because I wasn't playing and I wasn't part of that, and it was more frustration that part of the season rather than tough because I wanted to be part of a winning team. I wanted to all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff I had to deal with between August and January was I felt like right, I've done my dues, like I've
Yeah,
done my best.
sure.
Like, can I please have a go now in a winning side in a team that's doing well? Because obviously it would have been so much easier to perform in. That was my frustration, I think, and because obviously I still feel like I was the club captain. I was the one who was driving training, doing this. I still felt like I had a lot to offer on a Saturday, but I didn't get the chance in a winning team. I only really got a chance in a team that was on the floor. And I think that was the difference in how tough then half of the season was.
Yeah, I've just looked and I didn't realise it was you only played 4 times in 2023, which is staggering considering, like you say, the experience, the fact that you're club captain, you're coming off the back of a player of the year campaign. So I can totally understand how tough it was. I remember personally, and you can shoot me down in flames, that Bradford game. And I said first 20 minutes, I thought he was our best player.
Yeah,
But then it looked to me, once the game had ended, like you'd almost tried too hard.
yeah, there probably was an element of that.
I thought you were so intent on trying to rattle people and get into tackles and say, right, this is what we're about, that you almost,
Blew up. Yeah,
yeah, that
yeah,
literally was the words I was going to use. So I'm glad you said it because I don't, I'm not going to, you know more about the professional game than I do, 100%. But it looked to me like you spent 20 minutes almost almost like you was a kid again, probably trying to make
Yeah.
a good impression because you knew.
It almost did feel like that again.
Yeah,
It's like you're a youth team player and you've been in training with the team for so months, and it's like bang, you're playing, and you're like a little bit rabbit in headlights. You're a bit like, oh, do this, got to do that, got to do this. I was trying to do way too much rather than just worrying about my performance. But I think I found that difficult because I was club captain and I was nowhere near it. I wasn't even coming on. And then obviously I'm starting against Bradford, who, with all due respect, are a good side.
yeah.
And we had a lot of injuries that day as well, if I remember. Hence probably why I only played. But just found it tough, yeah, because I'm captain and Neil's obviously leaning on me saying, right, you need to get the boys up for it, get them going, look after them, whatever. And I get all of that. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I'm still my own person, my own
Mm-hmm.
player. And I've got to worry about myself first and foremost. And I think there was a whirlwind in the head of how to approach that game because I was coming from such a tough situation of
Mm-hmm.
not even involved to then walking the team out against Bradford. It was so up and down. It was almost head was scrambled a little bit. And like I say, after the game, and I wasn't involved again. So it was so tough. Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, these are the reasons I do these chats, and I really appreciate you being open and honest about it because otherwise we don't see or
Mm.
hear the effects it can, and it all comes back to the old thing about, and we've seen it over recent years with footballers and mental health and that type of thing, and it is becoming more prevalent, which I think is brilliant. Um, but it generally, historically, it's been, oh, how can a professional footballer be unhappy? He's doing what he loves for a job. He gets good money. He has
Yeah.
to work 3 days a week or whatever, or something ridiculous
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But it's not. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it, and it's not that you don't just go in and train for 3 or 4 hours and then switch off for the rest of
There's
the
way
day.
more to it, and I think it's excellent that people are doing more to recognise it because having played at every level, like you see it at every level, it's like regardless of money or lifestyle, like no one ever wants to play bad. Like
Mm-hmm.
no one tries to have a bad game because we're the ones who look silly.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously with social media, how obviously prominent that is now, like the comments and the abuse boys get on social media is affecting people.
Mm-hmm.
People say he's rubbish, how is it, and all that. Like it affects you, it affects you. And like I say, people should become aware of it because it does affect boys. And like I say, lower league football, when people haven't got millions to just make their life work okay or whatever, it can become a struggle and it's their livelihoods and they take it home to their families and their families see these comments, their friends see their comments, and it can make their life hell,
Mm-hmm.
for that period of time, which is tough.
Exactly, and you're just a bloke at the end of the day. You're a bloke that's lucky. I get that, and but you understand that you're lucky to do what you do and do what you love
Yeah,
as
and
a
we
career.
play football, but ultimately we want to go home and we have lives as well. It can't just be controlled by the football club or football. There's more to it than football.
Absolutely, Stuart. It's been a real pleasure, mate. I've really, really enjoyed this one, digging deeper into
No,
the
I appreciate
workings
it.
of a club captain and a professional footballer. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much, Gills fans. It's usually at this point where I say go and follow Stuart on Twitter and Instagram, but he stays well clear of that, and I don't blame him, to
Yeah,
be quite honest. I hope you've all enjoyed watching and listening to Stuart O'Keefe and his stories, and certainly Stuart, I hope that the last 18 months that were very tough, and I totally understand why, don't detract from your whole time in Kent because we loved watching you
yeah, no, I
for
appreciate all your
years.
support there.
Really appreciate you, and like I say, you definitely fall into the bracket of being a proper Gillingham type footballer, someone that wears his heart on his sleeve and runs through walls to play for the badge. And
Yeah,
we've always said that we know where we're at in the food chain, so to speak, as Gillingham Football Club and fans. And
yeah,
we don't expect to have the best players all the time, but we understand that if you go out there and put a shift on a Saturday and a Tuesday, we'll cheer you on all the time. And we
yeah.
loved watching you for 4 years, and unfortunately, it's not quite ended the way that certainly you would have hoped. I don't think, but thank you for your time. Like I say, Gills fans. I'm going to try and take a little break now. I said at the end of the season I was going to take a little break. This is now the fourth or fifth video since the end of the season. Um, don't know when we'll be back. Like I say, hope you've enjoyed it. Please keep liking, subscribing, retweeting, and doing all that you do because the channel keeps growing because of you lot, not because of me. Without any interaction, it just sits there idle. So thank you very much. Do not forget to check out the Art of Football website. Link is in the description. Enjoy your summer break. We'll be back soon. But until then, up the Gills.